In 1993, Nintendo worked alongside UK developer Argonaut Software, whom were responsible for the Super FX chip that would showcase 3D-like visuals for the Super Nintendo. The first game to showcase this new chip on the SNES was Star Fox, created alongside Shigeru Miyamoto and the team over at Nintendo EAD. While there was a sequel ready to release in 1995, Star Fox 2, it was shelved due to the N64 being around the corner for release, and decided to wait until that platform to release a new Star Fox installment. Star Fox 2 actually was not released publicly until 2017, when they included it with the SNES Classic. However, in 1997, the team brought forth Star Fox 64, drastically reshaping the IP in this excellent follow-up that had great visuals, a fantastic soundtrack, voice acting, superb gameplay, and the revolutionary inclusion of the Rumble Pack. The game became an instant success for the N64 and won the hearts of many gamers. Half a decade later, Star Fox returned in 2002 with the unorthodox yet much welcome Star Fox Adventures, which I've reviewed on the channel last year. Prior to this release though, Star Fox Assault was announced to be in development and that Namco would be working on this new installment. The team comprised of former devs that worked on Ace Combat 2, which at least gave some of those members familiarity with a flight-based game. After several delays though, in a nearly 3-year development cycle, was Star Fox Assault a game that was worth the wait, or does it fail to take off? Let's find out. Star Fox Assault takes place after both the events of Star Fox 64 and a year after the events of Star Fox Adventures. We see Fox and crew aboard the Great Fox, with Peppy now providing support from the ship as opposed to being on the battlefield, and instead, Crystal returns from Star Fox Adventures as being part of the crew now. With Andros gone, his nephew Andrew Oikini has taken his place unofficially, but in amidst a battle with him on his ship, it is revealed that a far greater threat is at hand by these insect creatures called Aporoids. There are core memories associated to these creatures that Fox and team need to collect and provide to Slippy's father Beltino that can help discover more about these creatures and their history against the Cornerian civilization. As you progress through the game's missions, the plot continues to unravel between pre- and post-mission dialogue, as well as cutscenes in between the missions themselves. The story is definitely one of the stronger aspects in Star Fox Assault that is very intriguing and does a good job of further fleshing out the overall lore and character development, and this is all while having a new threat that feels refreshing and twists and turns along the way.
Fox, I'm tracking Pigma on radar. Get back to the Great Fox now!
Star Fox Assault's gameplay is very much a return to form of what was created with Star Fox 64. And just a heads up, you may hear me draw comparisons between this game and Star Fox 64 quite a bit, being that this is mechanically a follow-up to that gameplay style. You will take control of Fox McCloud, flying the R-Wing alongside your crew, Falco, Slippy, and Crystal, as you go through missions blowing up every enemy in your way. Also returning is the Landmaster tank for land battles, and now there are on-foot action sequences that's new to the campaign mode. Star Fox 64 did have on-foot gameplay that was unlockable for multiplayer if you earned a medal in all levels in expert mode, but they've incorporated that concept to flow into the story mode of Assault, which is very much welcome. There will be essentially two styles of gameplay here, on-rail and open mission structure. Typically, the on-rails missions rely on using the R-Wing, where you'll fly forward and focus on trying to take out as many enemies as possible while dodging enemy fire. The open mission structure stages are more akin to those segments like in Star Fox 64, where you fly in all-range mode, but more on that in a bit. You will use your lasers and bombs while also using defensive maneuvers like doing a barrel roll and somersaulting to deflect incoming attacks. Controls for the R-Wing are relatively simple, in which you'll steer it with the analog stick, fire lasers with the A button, use bombs with the B button, boost with the Y button, simply do a barrel roll with the L trigger, and slow down with the R trigger. You can charge up your laser shots holding down the A button, which lets you lock onto a single enemy and when fired will do extra damage, as well as splash damage to destroy other ships within that small group of fighters. You will collect bombs throughout missions, which are perfect for clearing out an insurmountable number of enemies on screen quickly. You can simply fire it and let it detonate on its own, or if it collides with an enemy, or you can press the B button again after launching it to detonate it manually. There will also be power-ups along the way like laser upgrades, silver and gold health rings, and even Namco's flagship special icons that are hidden throughout each mission. You'll also notice a counter for hits on the heads-up display, which will be your score throughout the mission. Each enemy has a certain number of hit points allocated to them, and using the charge shot on small groups will garner more points, while destroying a whole group will net you bonus G points or group points to increase the score even more. As stated, you will also have your crew with you in missions. Keeping them alive will certainly help you out in the long run, as saving them may have them provide you further assistance. For example, Crystal uses her telepathy to determine a boss's weak point, Slippy provides data showing a boss's health, and Falco will provide you with additional bombs. If any of them go down in a mission, they will stay out for the remaining duration of that stage, but they will return in the next one.
Sorry, but I have to pull back.
Now, aside from the linear R-Wing missions, there are the on-foot missions. These play drastically different from the linear R-Wing segments, as you will have a fairly more open map to run around in, utilizing Fox's blaster. However, he can also pick up new weapons like a machine gun, sniper rifle, homing launcher, grenades, sensor bombs, and even a Gatling gun. He can also pick up and use a defensive barrier that lasts for a short time when activated. This will drastically come into use by the final on-foot mission. Fox is fairly nimble, in which he can run and strafe while also dodge rolling and jumping around the terrain. I have to say, I love the fact that he runs quite fast. Depending on the mission too, the Landmaster tank and R-Wing will be available on the map, which you can easily jump in and out of. What's neat too is that if one of those vehicles blows up, Peppy will send down another one to use. Now, while the hits counter is here in these missions as well, there is now a timed combo meter, which will further boost your hit counter in the end. The meter will increase its time if you kill enemies fast enough, but wait too long and have the meter deplete, and it'll reset the combo to 0. Every 10 kills will provide bonus hit points. Additionally, there are even segments where Fox will stand on a flying R-Wing and have to fire away with his cannon in another form of on-rail sequencing. These are fairly entertaining and change up the pace furthermore. Now, what's interesting is that there are 3 different control types to choose from when both on foot and using the Landmaster tank. First is the single stick mode, which lets you move and turn with the analog stick, move the camera and aim holding the R trigger down, and use the A button to fire. This reminds me a bit more of the control style akin to Metroid Prime. Then there's the dual stick option, which lets you move and strafe with the analog stick, aim and look with the C stick, and fire with the R trigger. And lastly is the original option, which replicates the control style on foot of the N64 unlockable on foot gameplay, where you use the R trigger to run forward and the analog stick to look around while still using the A button to fire. Now, what's a shame is that you can only choose the control options from the game's main menu options, rather than being able to change it mid-mission via the pause menu. And what's more frustrating is that the control decisions apply to both on-foot and Landmaster tank controls in unison. I wish you could have designated one style for on-foot and another for the Landmaster. The game definitely leans much heavier into the open mission map structure than the linear R-Wing missions. The missions all provide a healthy amount of variety, like going through a space station defeating certain targets, while the exterior is being overrun by aperoids. If your crew is struggling to keep them at bay, you can freely jump into your R-Wing, head out, take them out to put less pressure on the mission, and then fly back in to finish the task. Or even this mission on Saria, where you can freely choose to jump into the R-Wing or Landmaster for different scenarios, while also being on foot. The game does a great job of blending all these mechanics together to feel like an evolution of Star Fox 64's formula.
As soon as possible.
Bosses are a big part of Star Fox, and they're no slouch in this installment either. Each boss is massive, with specific weak points to hit, and are all varied. The opening stage boss feels like an amalgamation of a few bosses from within Star Fox 64, as well as a dogfight later in the game with Star Wolf and his crew. Then there are the new Aperoid bosses, and each are a lot of fun to tackle. The game ensures it utilizes every mechanic when facing off against each boss it throws at you. I honestly looked forward to each boss battle that awaited. Upon completing missions, you will see the results screen, showing how many hit points you got, who on your team made it back safely, if you found special items, and whether you acquired the medal score. Depending on the difficulty chosen, we'll add a multiplier to your overall score, and then you will see which medal you received in the end. If you earn at least 10 silver medals, you will unlock Namco's infamous classic, Xevious, to play at any time in the main menu. I always love when a game provides an unlockable classic game to play. Now, aside from the story mode, Star Fox Assault lets you revisit any mission with the mission mode, tackling any difficulty and trying to go for any remaining medals, as well as those special icons. Thankfully, the mission select screen shows how many you found in each level. There is also a survival mode where you must complete the game in a single sitting and without doing a game over. It's a nice little bonus for those looking to test their skills and a throwback to previous Star Fox games requiring that single sitting to complete it. I have to say, the more I played this game and learned the missions, the more I kept revisiting them to go for those medal scores and trying to beat my own time and scores. There's an addictive gameplay loop for revisiting the game, especially when you find a favorite mission to keep tackling. Additionally, we can't skip talking about the versus mode. Star Fox 64 was a massive multiplayer hit, and Star Fox Assault naturally needed to have this return. Versus mode allows up to 4 players to duke it out across a variety of stages, both from the campaign and exclusively designed ones. You can choose whether to make it a free-for-all or divide it up into various teams like 1v2, 1v3, 1v1v2, and 2v2. You can then choose your character and the stage. You can customize a few rules across each gameplay style, and if stages allow for the R-Wing, Landmaster, and on-foot mechanics, you can even choose which to allow or prohibit. The multiplayer has 3 types of modes: point, time, and survival, and you can customize the win variables for each one. It can definitely provide for a good amount of fun with the right crowd. I do really like that you can play as any of the characters here, and they even have unique stat breakdowns. There are unlockables within the multiplayer and are mostly dependent on how many matches you play. You can unlock new weapons, new stages, and even Wolf to play as, although Wolf you get by beating the game without any of the crew retiring from any stage. I do like the fact that there are unlockables that they reward the player with by just playing the multiplayer itself, and it gives more reason to spend time within this mode. Now, Star Fox Assault isn't without its faults. First off, the controls, while mostly fine, never really find that perfect medium. As stated earlier, you can't choose which controller you want to have separately for on-foot and Landmaster tank use. Thankfully, the R-Wing is not affected, and those are perfectly fine. The Landmaster tank doesn't feel great in dual stick, and no matter how much I used it, just felt clunkier and less responsive than I would have liked. Yet in single stick mode, it plays fine. The on-foot controls themselves I preferred in dual stick mode, but then I'd sacrifice for the wonky feel of the Landmaster tank during those missions. I also wish that Fox would turn faster when on foot. He runs incredibly fast, but he turns really slow in comparison. The game will take about 3 to 5 hours to beat depending on the difficulty selected, and while that sounds short, it's probably the longest Star Fox campaign in a single sitting. However, unlike other entries in the series, this is strictly a linear affair. There's no map of various planets to go to based on mission parameters completed, no secret paths, no alternate endings. This one's pretty straightforward, especially for a game that was in development for 3 years, which is a very long time for that console generation. The last thing to note is that for some reason, the Japanese release for this game had more unlockable multiplayer maps exclusively to that version, as well as 2 additional bonus arcade games to play. I'm not quite sure why that was the case. Visually, Star Fox Assault is a fairly nice looking game. Fox and his team all look good with solid animation and texture work. Space itself looks great with rich skyboxes and overall environments having life to them. One of my favorites being when you're on planet Fashina and you're in this blizzard that stands out visually. Both the R-Wing and Landmaster animate nicely as well, especially when doing barrel rolls or engaging the thrusters. Fox's animations when on foot and utilizing a variety of weapons are unique too, and you can tell which weapon he's using just from his stances, which is a nice little detail. The frame rate is interesting in this game though. In the linear R-Wing missions, the game runs at a rock solid 60 frames a second, and the game looks excellent. But the open zone missions run at 30 frames a second, and a majority of the game, approximately 70%, is this mission structure. In a way, it feels like a tale of 2 games and almost like 2 different teams worked on these styles. What's baffling though is that the enemy draw distance is pretty bad in these open zone missions. Enemies tend to become visible at short range as well as Fox's team, and some levels are worse than others. Like Saria has the worst draw distance for the enemies, and it's one of the smaller maps. Meanwhile, I will say Mission 8 has the most amount of enemies on screen and at least makes it more palpable to see the draw distance of enemies occur. If this were remastered today, they could easily remedy this and also bump up that frame rate, which would make the game feel far more polished. The art direction overall is quite good, and the game is enjoyable to see in action with all the destruction and number of on-screen enemies at times. I even really like how visually pleasing the UI in the game is and how vibrant it is. The color palette and overall appearance of the game is just quite nice overall. But I will also say, for a game in development for 3 years, I definitely expected a bit more. Star Fox Adventures released in 2002, less than a year into the GameCube's lifecycle looking the way it did, and while Rare developed that one, it was, and still is, a visual masterpiece. Namco should have been able to at least better polish the performance so that 60 frames per second was throughout the whole game, or at the very least improve the enemy draw distance in open missions. It's far from a bad looking game, as it's still visually pleasing and pops. It's just that Rare set this gold standard visually for Fox, and this feels less visually impressive due to this being in development for that long 3-year duration. In terms of audio, if you saw my top 10 most disappointing GameCube games episode that I released in 2021, I mentioned that the soundtrack was the biggest factor that made me not enjoy Star Fox Assault as much when I initially played it back in 2005. After the superb soundtrack of Star Fox 64, Assault's soundtrack feels less impactful up front. The main menu theme, for example, is catchy, if a bit too whimsically upbeat, with the orchestrated style here. And then there's the actual music within the missions, many of which are arranged orchestrations from Star Fox 64's soundtrack, but several don't quite stick the landing. They're too slow or less engaging for the most part. Star Wolf's theme, for example, feels like a Western showdown's about to happen rather than something intense. It's still fine when you're playing it, but these versions just don't stick with you after playing the game. On the flip side though, the more I replayed the game, the more certain songs truly stood out. In particular, two of the boss battle themes, which definitely get you into the intense battle that awaits at least. Some levels do have good tracks as well, and honestly, it's more the original compositions, like the opening stage and final stages, that stand out. I think the composers were just better off strictly comprising their own songs rather than trying to rearrange classics. On another note, the voice acting, while decent in itself, has a very odd low quality to it in the cutscenes. The voices sound like they're talking into a synthesizer, and it doesn't sound as crisp as I'd hoped.
Aperoids? Indeed, they are the enemies you faced earlier.
It's odd. The sound effects all do a good job though, and help bring the action on screen to sound the part. The sounds of the lasers, collecting items, explosions, hearing the R-Wing and Landmaster Tank maneuver, it's all good stuff that engrosses you into the action. Overall, it's better than I initially thought it was back in 2005.
Got it.
I'll try to draw their fire. The rest is up to you.
No out of harm's way.
No, Fox. It's weak point.
Namco had quite the undertaking with this project, especially with how highly regarded Star Fox 64 was and still is with fans. Despite some rough spots here and there, Star Fox Assault does precisely what it sets out to do. Take the formula of Star Fox, bring that back in some capacity, and evolve the gameplay with open zone structure, allowing for that freedom in mission combat. While it may not reach the masterful heights of Star Fox 64, it's a very good sequel that continues the Star Fox lore and pushes the narrative forward rather than retreading the same plot threads. And if you're looking to further continue the story, a year later in 2006, Star Fox Command released on the Nintendo DS, which would be the last installment canonically to play through. That being said, Star Fox Assault is one that grew to my liking a lot more now in 2025 than in 2005 and is very much worth your time. I also want to give a quick shout out to the GCG Nation enthusiasts, Local S'mores Pop-Tart, Retro Wolf, and Alejandro Mendoza. If you really enjoy the content and are interested in further supporting the channel, click that join button, and for $2 a month, you'll get early access to videos, membership shoutouts and videos, and exclusive icons that I made that go next to your username when commenting. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next episode, GCG Nation.
You